place to talk about movies, TV shows based on movies, toys based on movies, games based on movies, and rides based on movies. I'm your host, Mr. CCS, and these are my pets, George the Gorilla, Kyle the Dolphin, and Frank the Sea Turtle. I have to say this right now. This has been the hardest season of the show thus far. I have gone through a lot of good and a lot of crap over the past 11 months. Needless to say, I'm over it. However, I have 2 more reviews to get out of the way, and I'm going to do so. But before the finale, I would like to talk about a movie that came and went just last summer. So, despite the fact that The Dark Universe was an utter and embarrassing flop for Universal Studios that killed any chance for a reboot of the Universal Monsters franchise, on occasion, Universal would experiment with making 1 or 2 here and there. The first of these experimental movies was The Invisible Man, which was released in 2020 in association with Blumhouse, and stars Elizabeth Moss as the lead character. It was a critical success but failed at the box office due to the pandemic. However, despite that, Universal continues its partnership with Blumhouse and is currently working on a Wolfman reboot at the time of recording. Though considering the fact that a lot of Blumhouse's other work has been kinda hit or miss recently, I don't have much faith that that project will be good, which also has to do with the fact that I already have 2 great Wolfman movies to revisit. However, their next monster reboot following The Invisible Man was a strange beast for sure. Back in 1992, Bram Stoker's Dracula was released in theaters. I talked about that film already and gave it a ton of praise, #shameless plug. But what I didn't know was that after the release of that film, a proposed sequel based on the chapter of the new original novel simply titled The Captain's Log was tossed around. Honestly, if Hollywood were to attempt to adapt the entire Dracula novel, focusing on the content cut from the initial movie based on the major narrative is actually a very unique idea, and I would have liked to see that come to fruition, especially if the crew from the first film returned. Unfortunately, this project never came to fruition until 2019, when the rights were handed over to Amblin Entertainment, and the film was officially greenlit, shot, and released in 4 years. Unfortunately, the film received mixed reviews from critics and was a box office failure. This was around the time when the Hollywood writers and actors strikes were going on at that time, meaning writers and actors couldn't have promoted their work. Speaking of, the reason I never addressed the strikes was because of my dad being in the industry and actively supporting the union, so we were fighting our battle on that side. But I must state the following. Films and TV should never be produced without any talent. True art comes from the soul, something which artificial intelligence does not have. Hence why I will never use anything artificial intelligence whatsoever in the near future. With that little tidbit aside, was this movie really not worth anything at all? We're going to find out today. This is the last voyage of the Demeter. The crew of the merchant ship Demeter set sail from Carpathia to London to deliver a cargo of 50 unmarked wooden crates. However, they soon discover that they're not alone, as Count Dracula's unholy presence turned the trip into a nightmarish fight for survival. Okay, overall, I have very mixed feelings on this movie. On the one hand, it's interesting to see the filmmakers take a single chapter from an already sprawling narrative and make a movie based on simply that. On the other hand, however, it kinda doesn't work because at certain points you wish you were watching another straightforward adaptation of the story. However, once I got used to the characters and setting the movie gave me, I was on board for most of it. That said, this does have rough pacing here and there. Overall, however, I thought this story really worked for me, despite its shortcomings. Let's further explain why. So, out of all the characters in this movie, the only one that I was really invested in was Clemens, played by Corey Hawkins. He wasn't the best character or anything, but he certainly had a lot of conviction. He's a character that works hard, yet in a time where race was unfairly judged, he faced too many struggles. That said, at his core, he is a good man that is trying to do a duty in his world that is unfair. For a character that's such a minor one in the novel, I don't even recall if he has a name, I think the filmmakers did a good job in fleshing him out. I also really like the captain in this movie, played by Liam Cunningham. It's clear he's a seasoned sailor, but he isn't a jerk either. You can tell that he's a human being that cares about his crew, his ship, and his grandson. He has a duty and he's going to stick to it, obviously, but he's still a human being, and I loved that he wasn't just a jerk for the sake of being a jerk. He felt like a real person with layers, and that's what I liked about him. As far as his grandson goes, I really like what they did with him. He's loyal to his grandfather, but he's still a child, so he has vulnerabilities. My favorite scene is watching Clemens comfort him after the first kill of Dracula, and as soon as he's told to run along, you can see he tidies himself up and goes about his day after his consoling. Kids are resilient, and I think that scene portrayed that really well. Finally, the other two characters I was invested in were the first mate and the Romani girl. One cares for his profession on the ship and won't let it go down without a fight, while the other has faced Dracula on multiple occasions, and her willpower to overcome his corruption is incredible. As for the other characters, they were just vampire fodder for all I care. Though the big dude who played Colossus in the Deadpool movies was okay and had a pretty frightening death. Moving on to Dracula himself, this is less of the smooth and cunning Dracula and more of a bloodthirsty monster. While I like Dracula when he's more developed, this version is absolutely terrifying and serves for some of the movie's more frightening sequences. Other than that, however, he doesn't have much to do, so I can't really talk about him much. Again, he's good for what the movie builds him up to be, but that's about it. Moving on to the effects, what was surprising to me was how much the movie used practical effects. Dracula's design, the Demeter itself, and even the town of Carpathia are all built from scratch, and they all look great. For my money, the CGI effects I noticed were Dracula's wings and the combusting victims, but that kinda had to happen considering the fact that they are both very fantastical. Also, it's baffling that this film had a $45 million budget and it looks better than most larger budget movies that come out these days. That's a very sad thing to say. Moving on to the music, it was composed by Bear McCreary, who created a very eerie, unsettling score that fits in with the movie extremely well. Maybe on repeat viewings, I'll listen closer and definitely will like it more. Finally, we have the tone. This movie can be pretty frightening. It's not the scariest thing I've seen, mind you, but it does have some very unsettling moments, which include the way Dracula picks off his victims, and so on and so forth. However, the scariest parts of the movie were whenever a character that was bitten by Dracula bursts into flames. It was a gnarly sight to behold, and you can feel the pain that the victims were going through. That's something I never thought I'd say, but this movie was very brutal and haunting whenever it came to kills. Overall, The Last Voyage of the Demeter wasn't a great film, but I could see what the filmmakers and studio were going for. They wanted a straightforward monster movie with a dark tone, and that's what we have. Sure, its pacing isn't great and neither are all the characters, but it's still inventive and unique from the horror genre, and that's what I liked most about it. I give it a 7 out of 10. Well, that's all I have to say. Feel free to leave your thoughts on this film in the comment section, and tune in next week for the beefy finale, which covers 2 movies. With that said, my name is Mr. CCS, these are my pets, this is Movie Central, and that, my friends, is a wrap. See you next week.